As I promised yesterday, we are going to be diving more as to what we know about Call of Duty Black Ops 6 moving forward. And this one isn't necessarily a good one. It's pretty much a bad one, and that revolves around skill-based matchmaking and how it will affect Call of Duty Black Ops 6. And we actually know this because of a white paper that was put out last week in regards to skill-based matchmaking and exactly how it works in Call of Duty currently and what will change moving forward, hence how it will affect Black Ops 6. And a lot of you watching this are going to get pretty angry with this, and there is a reason for that, a really good reason for that, and that is what I wanted to explain how skill-based matchmaking actually works in Call of Duty and how it will work in Black Ops 6 moving forward. So I am not going to read through the entirety of these white pages. Number one, they are extremely boring, and number two, there's really only like 3 or 4 points that you really need to know and understand as to how the skill-based matchmaking actually works. So to break it down, what is skill-based matchmaking? So matchmaking is essentially based off of 2 pillars. They say it's a lot more, but essentially it's 2 things: your ping, and on top of that, your skill rating. They did confirm in this white paper that there is a hidden skill rating within matchmaking for regular multiplayer, not rank play. Rank play is a shown skill rating, whereas normal play is a hidden skill rating. The way that they determine this is basically on a scale of 0 to 1. So if you're a completely average player, your skill rating will be 0.5. If you are the best player, 1. If you are the worst player, 0. Now, the other thing that they confirmed is that this is adjusted after every single game that you play. Hence why if you do really good in a game, the next game, you're probably going to get in a much more difficult lobby. They also stated that this changes based off of the game mode that you're playing. So for example, if you're playing Team Deathmatch, your kill death is going to be weighted much more heavily. Whereas if you are playing something like Domination, it might be more score or other factors that play into account, also wins and losses, things along those lines. Now, you may be wondering what this means for the overall gameplay experience and what you have experienced in game. Essentially, what you need to know is that the better you do game after game, the more difficult lobbies you are going to get put into. Your level is not put into effect, and this is nothing to do with your overall gameplay in the time that the game's out. So if you're a level 1000, you could very well get matched with a level 3 who has had really good games to start things out. That is completely possible. Hence why, if you're a really good player, you will get matched with more hackers, even though they might only be level 15. It has nothing to do with their level or overall experience or how many games that they played. It is simply based off of recent and current experience in game. So the biggest problem I have with this is it punishes variety in game. What do I mean by that? Essentially, it punishes you for trying anything off meta. If I have 3 good games in a row, that next game, in order for me to succeed and do well, if I switch to an off meta loadout, all of a sudden I'm at a huge disadvantage because it's putting me against other players who are better than the ones I previously played in. And for me to continue to do better, I pretty much have to use the top tier weapons. I hate that. I do not like that. They even say in the white papers that some of your gameplay experience, if you're using off meta loadouts, you might have a couple of bad games in a row, so then it will put you with worse players. But all in all, that's just really annoying. You shouldn't have to get stomped for 2 games in order for this to happen. Now, this is where we get into why skill-based matchmaking is the way that it is. Essentially, they did some testing over a 2-week period where they had 2 cohort groups. One of the groups was given the normal skill-based matchmaking. The other was given reduced skill-based matchmaking. In other words, less skill-based matchmaking. What they found is the majority of players actually quit more often with less skill-based matchmaking, whereas the top 10% of players actually stayed in game and returned more frequently. Now, does this make sense? Yes, I've said this before and I will say it again. If you were watching this video, you were probably in the top 30% of players, if not the top 10% of players. If you're someone who watches videos on a game that you play, you are probably in the top tier of players. Keep in mind, the average kill death in a game is 0.86. Or around 0.86. Because of things like exploding barrels, killing yourself, things along those lines, it's actually below 1. So if you're like a 1.3 or 1.4 kill death player, you're probably in like the top 10%. Now, it turns out that the top 10% of players, as you were seeing by this graph here, are the ones that stay more frequently when skill-based matchmaking is reduced. They also did a study of increasing skill-based matchmaking, and it was the opposite. Top tier players didn't stay as frequently, whereas the other players, the other 90% of players, actually stayed in game longer and returned more frequently. Now, if you are Activision and you are Sledgehammer, which version are you going to go with? The one that keeps 90% of the players more, or the one that keeps 10% of the players more? Now, I want to be clear, this is the part of the study that I believe is 100% correct. Now, their justification for it is what I disagree with. And what their justification is the more players that leave, the more sweaty the game actually gets. So what they mean by this is, say they get rid of skill-based matchmaking altogether, the players that are not going to return to the game are the worst players, therefore making the bottom bracket of players a little bit better. And then all of those leave, and then the bottom bracket of players is a little better again. And it slowly does that until the only players that remain are the sweatiest of players. Now, the reason why I disagree with this is there was a time when skill-based matchmaking isn't the way that it is now. Skill-based matchmaking was more so based off of level, it was based off of player experience, it wasn't based off of every single game and how that you do in that individual game. So, because of this, I just don't see how that can be true. How was Call of Duty ever successful if players would just leave if they were not the best players in the lobby? Now, I will say, in recent Call of Duties, I find that less players leave. I do find that that is a thing in the middle of games. There's less leaving in games. Now, this is not the only situation where this causes a problem. Now, I've seen a lot of people say, oh, this is why players reverse boost. Now, in a lot of cases, reverse boosting doesn't actually work. And what they explain by this is kills to yourself. If you go and jump off the map 100 times in a row, they don't actually count towards your SR rating. They have seen people do that and they have counteracted this, so it's only deaths from enemy players. So yes, you could go into 10 games in a row, just run towards the enemies on shipment, get killed over and over again, and then it's going to put you in a lower bracket. That would technically work. But there are other ways, because the other thing that they talk about is team balance. And I'm going to break this down as simply as possible because it is confusing. But the way that team balance actually works according to these white papers is if you have a player on your team who is a 1 SR, and you have a player on your team who is a 0.5 SR, and you have a player on your team who is a 0.1 SR, your overall SR for your team is going to be around a 0.5, and they will try to match you with another team that's overall SR is similar, and they try to create as little variance as possible because they want your chances to win a game to be 50-50. Every single game, that is what they want. Now, there are other things that come into play there. If you continue to play with that group, the better your group does, the more likely you are to be against sweatier and sweatier players because your SR is going to go up and your team SR is going to go up because of that as well. So technically, if you are a top tier player, you are a 1% player, you are a 1 SR, the best way for you to get a crappy lobby is to get into a game with everyone else on your team being absolutely horrible. That is the way to do it. And yes, it does work. People have talked about it before. Two boxing is what some people call it. To have one Xbox that is logged into an AFK account, and then yours, which is a top tier account, and you're going to get worse lobbies. That does actually work, and what the information they've given out on this stands by that. Now, what they're going to try to do is match you with a similar team that has a bunch of horrible players and one really good player, and they think that that will balance it. Now, this also explains why when you're playing solo, your team, if you're a top tier player, can be absolutely garbage and then match you up against a bunch of average or even like one good player and a bunch of bad players. It tries to keep the match as close as possible to going a 50% win rate. And of course, that's incredibly frustrating. And based off of this white paper, it is not changing. This is going to be the same system that is in Black Ops 6, almost 100% guaranteed, because they retain the most players. And they have done tests on either side, reducing, increasing skill-based matchmaking, and the system that they have, they just say is the best for overall player retention. Now, here is my opinion on this. I actually think this is somewhat okay, but if they are doing this, why make it a hidden SR? The first FPS game that I played on console was Halo 3. in public matches, everyone had a visible SR rating. They were different like emblems to go with it, and it almost worked like ranked play. Why do they not just put this into every game mode and then have one mosh pit game mode that does not have skill-based matchmaking? I guarantee as a whole, most people are going to play those regular modes and try to show off that SR and improve it. But as of right now, it is completely hidden in a way where we are just guessing. Did we do well last game? Well, maybe we're a little bit higher. We're going to get in a sweatier lobby. Why hide it if it's confirmed that it's there? If it's not going anywhere and it does make the gameplay experience better, just show it. Make it visible for all players. You can still have ranked play with a ranked play set of rules, but you can also have an SR rating in game. If it's what they say and this is better for the game and better for player retention and it is not going anywhere, they should put it into the game in a way where it makes sense and is visible to players and isn't a hidden thing and isn't sneaky and doesn't feel like you're being cheated every time you play the game. That is how I feel about this, and that is essentially what is going to happen. So yes, if you're wondering about skill-based matchmaking, whether it is going to be in Black Ops 6 and how it'll work, that is exactly how. Take what you have in Modern Warfare 3 right now, port it into Black Ops 6, that is it. That is what's going to be there. And that is that. Your level doesn't matter. What you have unlocked doesn't matter. It is just how well you have done in your last few games. That is it. Plain and simple. So, let me know what you think down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe, notifications, all that kind of jazz. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time.